Evening everyone. Just waiting for a couple of people to check this out maybe. Just setting up a few things and then I'm going to be right with you, okay? I see a few of you logging on. Give me a couple of minutes guys, I'll be right with you. Just take a look at what I've set the screen on and I'll be with you in a second. Whew, warm in here. Very warm in here. Turn the heating down a touch. Oh. Whew. Right, okay. Hello, good evening. I can see a couple of names being added to this watching. Stick around, I'm going to tell you all about a brand new ZX Spectrum Next game that's in development and explain exactly where it's come from. But what you're seeing here on screen is very representative of exactly how it should look when it's completed. So yeah, I'll talk you through it very shortly. How's it going, Gary? You alright, fella? Hope you're having a good evening. Bit nippy outside, bit warm inside. Bonfire nights and everything out the way. Run up to Christmas now, you know how it is. Right. So anyway, gonna switch this back to me. And let's talk about exactly what we're dealing with. Right. Hello everyone. Hope you're all well. I'm gonna copy this back anyway to my wall as a complete video for those who haven't caught it live. But basically, I'm doing this as a bit of a spontaneous video this evening to let you know that in light of the system coming out very shortly, I've decided to start work on my very own Spectrum Next game. Now, that's going to come as a shock to some of you, and that's because A, I've never learned coding. B, I've never worked in the industry before. I've never done anything like that. How's it going, Mikey? And C, with everything else got going on, it's going to be hard to squeeze it in, but I'm going to manage it. Now, the game I'm doing is a game called Revival Survival, and that's going to sound very familiar to a lot of you out there, my friends and people who may not know me personally. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory as to how this game has come about. So, the game itself, a couple of years ago when we first started doing Revival Retro events, obviously everybody out there knows that I run Revival Retro events and we create the UK's biggest dedicated retro gaming events. Well, a couple of years ago I decided for a bit of fun to give game design a try. And I also build arcades for a living. That's my main job. And, well, it was at the time. And I wanted to make my own game. I'd always wanted to make my own game. I never really had the motivation and I never really had the know-how on how to do it. And I decided that I would give it a go. Now, not being able to code, I kind of had to jump a few steps ahead in Gaming Creation 101. And I used a tool in order to create this game. Now, the game allows you to create and make your own games, but anyone who's ever used game creation tools before will tell you most of them suck. This one, I'm glad to say, it didn't. It is bang on, and the idea was it allowed you to create arcade-style gameplay. And once you get to grips with it, well, I did get to grips with it, and on one strange winter evening, probably nearly 5 years ago to this day, I randomly sat down with it and I took a look and I stayed up for 72 hours solid for some really random reason, And what I did was I basically sat down with this tool, I sat down with Photoshop, and I started just creating. And what I did is I made this game. Now this game is it's probably not the genre. I mean, my favourite genres out there are things like fighting games, brawlers, the 90s stuff really, you know, 80s into 90s arcade era. But I've always loved arcade style gameplay, and I wanted to create a game that I could tweak and I could easily kind of adjust the difficulty levels and, you know, be creative with the way it looks, but I didn't want it to be overly complex and something I would have to spend too long figuring out things like AI and stuff on. So what I did is I created this game, and along with the premise, I mean, I did do the kind of classic rescuing the maiden kind of affair originally, and then I went off that idea and I thought, well, let's do something that's not been done before. Let's do something that, you know, nobody else can do and I can genuinely claim to be my own. And I started creating this game, and I put myself in it, a bit egotistical, I know, and I'm in as the hero, and I came up with this idea. You know, we were just starting out the events of me going about my business and meeting with people I know and sticking a few of my friends in this game and making a game where basically I have to save a revival event because the gremlins in the system have come to life and gotten loose, and they're running amok amongst the event, and it's my job to rein them all in, retain all the games and consoles that they've stolen, and save the day. So that was the premise anyway. So I started early on, and in 72 hours I was able to completely create a game. Before I knew it, I'd built 5 levels. I got going with the pixel art, and once I realised, once I had a flow going, and I knew what constraints I was working within, I managed to put together a complete game within 3 days solid, which I was quite impressed with, even for, you know, being tool assisted. You have to do everything from scratch yourself. You have to do all the graphics. You have to set all the parameters of movement, collision, all the sound effects, all the music, all the boundaries of the game, the level transitions, the title screen, all that stuff. I had to do all that from scratch, and it wasn't easy, but somehow 72 days solid. My wife went mad at me because I just stayed up and I was there with the Red Bulls next to me and I was glued to my PC and I just couldn't pull myself away. So that was how it started, and then a short while after I thought, well, let's, for a bit of fun, let's see where we can go with this. So I laid out this level structure. The game itself is a sort of maze chase game with elements of Pac-Man, Gauntlet. That's the way I always touted it to start with, because you've got like a combat element. You're running around a maze, but you're not just collecting dots or having to follow a set pattern. It's very much about reflexes. It's not independent on patterns, it's dependent entirely on your reflexes. Pretty fast paced. It's not super difficult, but it's definitely a challenge. And the levels and everything are all people and scenarios and places that people are familiar with from the events. So I ran with this idea and I started a Kickstarter. Everyone was starting to use Kickstarter around then, and I thought it'd be no different. So just for a bit of fun, I started a Kickstarter, and I basically put it out there, and I wanted to raise just enough money to complete the game, to fund all the elements for the cabinet, because I wanted to make a full arcade machine out of it. Obviously that's what I do, so I custom designed a dedicated shell for it. I did all the front marquee, bezel and control panel artwork for it. I hired Oliver Frey, who used to be the cover artist for Crash and Zap. I paid him to basically create a custom art in the classic arcade style, where the graphics, where the characters and the in-game action is exaggerated in side art, and he created a brilliant side art piece for the cabinet. And if you've ever been to our shows in the last couple of years, it's been out at pretty much every event. And the way I did the Kickstarter was basically people would basically submit, it was only a few quid, £5, £10, £20, and basically you pay and you could appear in the game as a sprite. And what I did is I created a whole deck of sprites of people with 2-frame animations inserted in the game in various parts using photos that people submitted to me. And I've kind of carved a certain look for the game that way. I've developed a look for the characters, I've developed a look for the backgrounds, and I've developed my own kind of 16 by 16 pixel sprite style, which I'm really happy with. A lot of face detail. They've got like big heads, if you know what I mean. And everybody was really happy with what I was doing. And I also had a few small businesses sponsor me, a few ex-developers, and that threw a few quid my way to help get it built. And I basically raised enough to make the machine and to get it all finished up properly. It's not cheap to build an arcade machine, and once all was said and done, everybody would get a copy of the game. Now, everything went sweet with this, and it seems like a long time ago now, but the intention was to get the machine completed for Revival 2014, which was our second major event, and one of our biggest to date. It was a massive event at Dunstall Racecourse, and it was like, it took pride of place, and everybody had paid to be in it, couldn't wait to see it and play it. Everybody came and had a go. We had John Ramiro come along for the first time that year. He came along, and before it all opened up, I was introducing him to the game, and he was playing away on it really happily and enjoying it. And since then, a lot of my developer friends have jumped on it at shows. I even added a little plaque on the front of it using the vinyl side art, which is a guest roll call. And if you ever come to the events, I'll put some pictures in the comments and follow up to this. All of our developer guests and people from the world of gaming have signed this roll call over the last couple of years, and we've filled one piece, and I've actually got to put a new piece on the front now for the next event, else there won't be room for any more signatures. But we've had all my developer friends sign it. We've had guys from Rare, Sensible, we've had people from the world of the magazines, id Software, we've had Special Effects, Ocean, people from the world of Commodore, people from the world of Spectrum, just loads and loads of people signing it, and it's looking really, really cool, and it's a nice showpiece for the events. However, 2014 was supposed to be the official unveiling of it, after which point it would be released as a game to the people who backed it. Now, what ended up actually happening was, stupidly, I made an amateur error. 2 nights before the event in 2014, I started experiencing problems with the PC that I was using, and I made the dick mistake, unfortunately, of using the PC I was developing on in the arcade machine itself. Now, the problem was I hadn't checked all my voltages properly, I hadn't wired everything up properly, and I put the PC in, and I blew the PC the day before the event. The reason that was a problem was I hadn't taken sensible precautions, and I hadn't backed up my work. Now, I had backed up my work previously. I mean, this was the August. I'd backed up my work till about March, April on a previous PC. But then when it came to the time of the event, it went, and I had to have it out. And the best I could do was to pull off this 4 or 5 month old build from an older revision of the game and put it on the system, and that is pretty much the version that exists in the cabinet to date. It was, it was 90% complete, but I had to make a lot of changes after that, as certain people change their minds on Kickstarters, certain people break off all contacts. It was very difficult to coordinate all the names that kind of went into it. And not only that, but I'd completely redesigned stages that had taken me, back then I had a lot more free time, and they were taking me like 7 days, 14 hours a day work to get this artwork done. And unfortunately, I lost all that work, so I was crushed by that. And when I tried to pick it up after that point, obviously Revival started to build momentum. I also somehow lost access to my Kickstarter account, which I attempted to recover, but they don't give you any kind of, they didn't give you any kind of support back then, and I've never been able to recover my Kickstarter account. So since, I think it was early 2015, I lost access to Kickstarter. I told people that I'd have to go back to the drawing board. Some people pulled out in that, and then what happened was 3 or 4 times I restarted the game, I sent out preview copies of the game to most of the backers who requested it. Most of the perks went out, apart from the sprite art, which I wanted to get out. But deals start to fall apart and things like that. And without access to the Kickstarter, I couldn't pull all the relevant information I needed to reach each and every person. What ended up happening, I would start developing a section and then a company would disappear or change name and I'd have to start again to get them into the game. Some people I just couldn't get hold of with the last name details I had for them. And I realised how hard it was to put something together that effectively needed a couple of hundred contributors in some small part. So I wondered if it would ever actually be finished. Now, as it happened, things got very tough. I lost my dad that year. I lost my nan. You know, I'm not giving my X Factor story here. You know, things got pretty tough. Anybody who knows me knows that things got pretty bad at home for me. My health took another downturn. And every time I tried to start and continue and finish this game, I couldn't actually do it. There was no way I could buckle down for long enough and spend the time I needed to do it. And it's been in limbo ever since. Every couple of months I've revisited it to tweak certain things, convincing myself I would actually finish it, and I've never been able to do it. So it's been in limbo anyway. And, you know, I apologise to everybody who wanted to get involved, especially my friends. Most of my friends have been absolutely cool. They understood the situation and they knew it was only ever a bit of fun. You know, it wasn't a business venture. It was just a bit of fun I wanted to have at the event for people to play. The intention was to have people do high score competitions and everything on it and win tickets for following events. Never quite worked out that way. But the cabinet exists. It's been out there and a lot of people have had preview copies of this. In fact, if you jump on YouTube, a couple of people gave it a whirl. Big problem is with it now, of course, is it was developed for Windows XP and it won't unfortunately work on newer Windows without using a virtual machine, which is it's a bit of a shame, but there we go. But you can play it on Windows 10 if you do use a virtual machine, and you know, I've sent the game to a few people since. So that brings us kind of to today. The last couple of years I've been working hard on the events, trying to build something of a business, and obviously getting to this point where I can start looking at new avenues. Now, obviously, the Spectrum Next. Now, the Spectrum Next, I'm a massive fan of. I've praised it up. I've done lots of videos on people's games in development to date. I'm doing my best to push this system because, to me, it represents more than just nostalgia. It's my origins. You know, I'm big in gaming now, and I'm big on the gaming scene. How's it going, Chris, mate? You pan it back. I'm sure you can have a bit of input on what we was talking about. I've just been talking about the history of Revival. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate that, mate. And you know, I've been following. I've been pushing the Next, and it means a lot to me. Now, I've always said I ordered my Next. I did the pre-orders. I've got the top of the line laser etched version. You know, the limited edition. Me and my brother have both gone with that. And we can't wait for it to arrive. And we always said we wouldn't mind developing a game jointly together on it, learning some coding, and maybe going back to roots to learn some base coding on there. But again, I find my time a bit more limited and things like that. How's it going, Jeremy? You all right? And so I thought, well, the Next is still a good opportunity to do it. Now, it was always my intention to clear my schedule and actually finish Revival Survival as a game for the PC, just as it was originally intended on Kickstarter. And I've got to this point now, and I'm ready to begin doing that again. But then I got talking to friends of mine who are a little bit better with the coding than I am, and they liked basically what they saw in the game that I did, and they convinced me to, you know, maybe, you know, this is the kind of game, because it's an arcade style game, it was perfect, it was ripe to be converted for the Next. Now, thinking about it more and more, I thought, this has got to happen. So, what we've done, the game itself, I'm going to switch back to it now, and I'll talk you through it as we go to. So, the game itself, this is when you can see the copyright there, 2013. That's how long ago it was originally created, right? This is the last complete build that I did and packaged up, right? So the game itself, it's a maze chase game, and it's done in a kind of classic arcade aesthetic. You've got the kind of Namco style 8x8 text. You've got you've got a colour palette which looks very familiar of, the 8-bit era, but I've kind of added a bit more depth than that. It is a PC game and it doesn't have major limitations. So even though the animations look basic, the characters are all fitting within a 16x16 sprite limit and things like that, the game itself has the capabilities of a PC. So you've got access to a full, I think it's a 32-bit colour palette. You've got no limit on the number of sprites on screen. You can do all kinds of effects. The game can be an infinite length. I'm not working within those kind of restrictions. Now, even though those restrictions aren't there, and they are on something like the Next, my friends pointed out to me that in terms of gameplay and in terms of layout, it wouldn't actually be much to port the entire game to the Spectrum. Now, as everybody knows, back in the day, the Spectrum didn't fare well when it came to ports, especially arcade ports. Arcade ports were big back in the day, and they weren't very good because of the limitations. All the home systems suffered, but the Spectrum most of all. The fact it didn't have sprite capabilities was probably the biggest, thorn in its side. But the Spectrum Next can. Now, so far, there's been some games inspired by other genres and other games that already exist, but there's no direct arcade port. So for all intents and purposes, this will be the Spectrum Next's first dedicated, proper arcade port. Now, I know it's an arcade of a modern standing, but it's an arcade in the classic style, and it's the kind of capabilities the Next can handle. So we wanted to prove that. Now, there's tools that exist now which allow you to more easily port your graphics and images and stuff like that into a Spectrum Next. I think Adrian Cummins used that technique for getting some of the graphics that already existed for his games so quickly over into things like Dungeonette and that. And I'm pretty sure some of the other guys have used similar techniques for transferring stuff that they've created elsewhere onto the Next. The palette is slightly more limited on the Next, so it doesn't translate perfectly. But anybody who saw my teaser video the other night, that is exactly where we're up to. That is the result of not much work at all. And basically what we've done is we've created a first level of the game with moving sprites in the background. The full backdrop is there, kind of getting a feel for the screen layout, and we've got a moving main character. So we're off to a good start, and that was done simply by porting the assets from this into that and applying, I suppose, a basic maze game kind of coding into it. So I'm going to play through the game here and just show you a little bit of what it's like. Most of you will have seen this before. Some of you might recognise yourselves in this, because I know a few of you watching this are actually in it. But there's going to be some major character changes to this. I'll talk more about that as we go on. So I'm just going to show you what the game's like, and let me know your thoughts, obviously. I'll go into a bit more detail and read your comments in a bit, guys, but just let me play through a little bit. And bear in mind that this was unfinished, but for the first few levels in particular, they're pretty close to how I wanted them to be. So we hit start, and we get a premise of what the game is about. You'll recognise a few of the characters on screen here. There's myself, there's Chris Wilkins, that's my brother and his wife. We've got Simon Hardy over here. No, hang on, is that Simon Hardy or Spencer? They look very similar. And then, obviously, there's the premise for what's going on with the game. And the game is up, down, left, right controls, but it's also 2 buttons, and I'll go into that shortly, how we're going to handle that. 1 button is to fire, 1 button is to jump, and your idea is to collect all the games. There are different speed enemies. Some enemies hide games. There are breakable scenery features, and you have to destroy certain ones to reveal other hidden games. There's extra life capabilities, and it's basically a 2 hits and you're dead affair for your character. So let's play through level 1 and show you what we're dealing with. So there's my character starting in the middle of the screen, just above Big Vinny there, our security man. And you can see we have to run around and collect things like Mega Drive games, Game Gear games, NES games, Master System games, and just skip by Chris there. And all the time the enemies are chasing us down. Now each of the enemies on screen has got a different algorithm. They are all inspired by classic video game characters, but they're not exact, and they have all been drawn by me, so at least there's some originality in that. So we've got the crazy frog, we've got the space raider, we've got the ghost, and then we've got the crazy barrel, and they all behave slightly differently. The barrel has a random pattern which chases you around screen, but it takes a lot of hits to kill, and it can change direction at will. The invader takes less hits, but will pursue you slowly. You can easily get away. The ghost will pursue you directly, and as you can see, you can walk on off the sides of the screen, and certain enemies can chase you off there. The ghost being one of them. The barrel can't chase you. You've got the ability to shoot, and you've got the ability to jump. So unlike maze games where you kind of locked down, I mean you are locked down to a grid, but it's a pretty expansive grid, and the ability to jump adds an element of escape tactic. So it's just long enough to clear one enemy. So we run around, we collect all the things, but then you realise, well, I haven't kind of collected everything because the level hasn't finished. So if we go down here, you'll see we've got banners, and behind those are hidden games. So we have to just go around and grab those. But I run out of time because I'm talking too much. So let's try that again. I'll try and complete the level now just to take you on to the second stage. Giving you a rundown of what's what. So there is a time limit of 2 minutes on this. So you have to be fast. And even though it seems kind of easy to get away, I kind of know where everything is, and I know what the enemy behaviour is, so it's easy for me to kind of dodge. I will be tweaking all this for a final version, and there will be more characters to be added eventually, but for now, this is pretty much how I want it to be. You can see a few people dancing around in the background there. They're people who've paid to be in the game, and that was the last item, so we go through. And then for each stage, you move into a different area of the game, and you can see here where things like the corporate sponsorship came in. Somebody had a mobile game there. They asked to be put into the game. We've now got what I call the special enemies rather than just the standard ones. That one there is a character called the Purple Warrior. Sorry, the Plum Warrior. I'll get it right, not the Purple Warrior. We've got Mr. Andy Spencer there from RCM, heading up his stand. We've got Max Hall and Jackie Mason there, stuck together like glue as they are at events, enjoying every event. Love those guys. We've got the guys from Retro Gaming Roundup down here in the corner. Again, those guys have done us a treat when it comes to things like podcasts, advertising the event, coming and sharing information about it. And yeah, this level always got people caught out because it appears like you've got everything and then everybody's wondering what the hell to do. And as the enemies respawn and reappear, everybody panics. So we need to clear some enemies in order to get the last game, and I'll show you where it is in a second. And we can't get it yet because if we do, we're going to get tailed by these enemies, and if we're not quick enough and not careful enough, we're dead. So we'll clear a few there. We have to sneak in here, shoot that banner, and that's the last one. If you try and walk in from the left, you get electrocuted on the wires there, so don't want to go that way. Now we move on to the arcade, everybody's favourite place when it comes to the events, and things start to get a bit more tricky. We've got narrower lanes to run down, a lot more distractions in colour from the arcade machines, We've got a few more escape routes. We've also got a few more special enemies, like our mate there, Paul Cole, as Prince Hippo. Got Simon Marston and Spencer there in normal attire, next to the VR machine. Good old Pete Smets there from Belgium, doing his thing on his store. Obviously selling his arcade wares like he has been doing. Pete's a great guy. Been coming over from Belgium for the last couple of years, you know, to come to our events and sell games. Oops, sorry, I'm changing the screen effects there. I'll go into that in a minute. Lean on the wrong key. And should be nearly done with this one. But yeah, this one's a bit more of a challenge because the enemies respawn faster and you haven't got as many escape routes. But there we go. I'll go to level 4 and to level 5 just to show you the little nod to the past. But yeah, this is one of my favourite levels. This is when things start to get hard. The enemies have sped up a lot. We've got a special enemy there called the Cyclopath. And he's basically, I think it's a fellow called Thurston who loves his cycling, and the speed he moves at and the way he pursues you, he can move as fast as you can, so trying to outrun him isn't a good idea, and his path can sometimes really catch you off guard. You've got a few more hidden features in this. We've got things hidden in the bins. Oh, I took a hit there, that wasn't good. The barrels can head you off rather easy, and I'm getting trapped, and I died. I'm hitting the screen effect again, so I'll be careful where I'm placing my fingers. I'll see if I can just get past this level just so I can show you the next level, and then I'll talk a bit more about where we're going with this. On some stages, you'll need to clear the obvious things that are on screen. Some stages you won't need to clear the hidden things. Some stages you will need to clear the hidden things. I've got to set the parameters based on the difficulty, and as I go a bit further on I haven't set those exactly, so I will get round to that though. But I've pretty accurately recreated scenes from events you typically see. You know, we're out in the car park, you know. There's more stages in there, such as the bar, the chill out area, the talks room. You know, anybody who's been to our events will know all these places, and it just seemed perfectly fitting for the game. You know, it wasn't hard to think of scenarios. Now at this point there should be an intermission, but it isn't there. This takes us to Specky Hell. Now Specky Hell is a special stage put in where basically I return to the hall and I get sucked into the machine. The baddies really want to see me done over, so they suck me into a spectrum, and then I have to get the games just to escape from the system. There was actually going to be a Commodore-based stage to follow this, but time restraints meant I couldn't actually do that. I may put that one back in at some point, but this level's got a few extra little tricks. First of all, the enemies are all Spectrum-related characters. We'll see there we've got Boris, not Horace, Boris. And I'm pretty sure a certain person watching this is appreciative of that kind of nod and okay with me doing that. But you can see the enemies, when they respawn, they're respawning as standard enemies. That's not correct. That's not the way I want it just yet. There's actually a hole in the wall down the bottom I need to fix. But there's little cool things on this. Instead of the standard walk-offs at the side, we've got breakable doors, which you have to demolish, and that opens up your escape route. But it's a bit tight to get round. But you can also go off the top and bottom of this one. Haven't implemented the doors yet, but you can see there you can sneak off the top of the level, come on the bottom. So everybody should be able to recognise what this game is from. And some of the other sprites on screen are from games that are very similar to it from the Spectrum. So to clear this stage, there's a couple of hidden things in the scenery. We break away the walls, and hidden behind the shields and the window, we got Spectrum tapes. So, but anyway, yeah, beyond that point, things aren't exactly precise, so I'm going to step out of that now and switch back to me anyway. So anyway, that is Revival Survival, and I don't know what you all think of it. I know some of you, like I say, were backing it originally, and you're probably itching to get to see it finished. And the good news is now it will be. My intention is to eventually, the people who originally backed this, I will arrange some kind of way for them to get hold of the version that we finish, and probably for the Spectrum Next as well. And I don't know what we're going to do with it yet. I mean, I don't know whether you guys would like to see it released as a full Spectrum Next game. You've already seen the preview video as a kind of proof of concept. You can see there what we're aiming for with the game, so you know it kind of already exists. It's very Spectrum-like. We've got a few challenges to deal with, which I'm going to go into just now, actually. First of all, when it comes to the controls, obviously, we're going to try and do a first for this. The first being, there ain't many games just yet that utilise more than one control. I'm a big fan of arcade-style controls, and even though a new controller and new control standard hasn't been implemented yet, in the form of a multi-button controller that becomes the standard, I know there's a lot of people out there who like to play on keys, so we're thinking about having a system set up on this to still utilise several different controls, and also be one of the first to use a Mega Drive pad as a standard. So you'll have up, down, left. So there'll be three. We're hoping to have it so there's three options basically. Play on a keyboard like normal. One button for jump, one button for fire. Play on a standard Kempston joystick, and the way we will likely do that, we'll have to test to see how it works, but it'll be a case that firing will be an automatic affair when you hold the button down rather than having to tap it like you do now, like you do on the arcade version. But then you'll hold the button down to fire, and then you'll probably double tap the button to jump. A good way of getting out of an emergency situation. It should feel just like the arcade. And then of course option 3 will be to use a proper Mega Drive joypad if you want to do it that way, and then you'll have up, down, left, right on the D-pad, and you've got plenty of buttons available. We can assign a start button, a fire button and a jump button to that pad. I'd like to see that because it'll be one of the first games to do that, which I think would be nice. The Spectrum Next needs to be able to show that it's capable of doing arcade ports, and this, for all intents and purposes, would be the first arcade port that's been announced for it. So I'm quite proud that it's going to be my game, and I'm quite proud that I'm working on it. My chief role in this at the moment is it's my job to take all the graphics that I created and basically convert those down to Spectrum Next standards. Now that's not going to be such a math task, and I'll show you why on my screen just here. Now the Spectrum Next, get back on the screen. The Spectrum Next has a standard screen resolution of 256 by 192, I believe, and as coincidence would have it, the original game that I created has a resolution of 256 by 256. So, in terms of porting the stage, this is what the original arcade stage would look like for stage 4, right? So you can see there the play field is pretty much square. We've got the set edge there. We've got an 8x8 kind of pathing block that goes all the way around the stage. You've got a 2-minute timer, and you've got so many things to collect. I'll answer any questions in a minute, guys. Bear with me. We didn't want it to be a scrolling affair, so because we wanted it to be in a Pac-Man style, and we didn't want all the processing power to be going on the scrolling background. For the style of game it is, I wanted it to be a single screen affair, because that way you're forced to look at the action that's going on in various parts of the screen at once. That's the distraction that adds to the difficulty. So what we've done is, if I go to this folder and call this up, you can see what we've done. What I've done is I've taken the standard stage and effectively cut it down by about 1/3. The Spectrum Next resolution, like I say, is 192 by 256. So we've got 256 width, and then obviously the Spectrum border. And what I've done is I've basically trimmed off a certain section of the stage, and I've made it so certain parts of the HUD will actually be at the top in the playfield, in the standard screen playfield area, but then we're going to be experimenting with using sprites to display stuff in the border area. So again, ticking another box, we're moving stuff into the border area for the standard game, because we've got score, health and lives at the top, but what we don't have is the time or the there's one other thing, I think it was the high score has to go at the bottom as well, so that has to be introduced somewhere, so we're going to try and do that at the bottom. So reducing the stage size, what I've got, I mean, you can see the difference between the two there. I've taken elements like the guard's hut, the exit sign, the bushes, the more interesting things, the section with the bins, and what I've done is I've cut them down, remade the stage size and everything, relayed the paths, and made it so some of the key elements are there, and the stage, you know, layout is akin to the arcade. It will still be in pretty much the same colours, it will still be in a similar layout, you'll still got the escape routes on the sides, but obviously then it's slightly different. I'll show you again, if I go through, I've already done the first couple of stages. So stage 1, you saw it just with Mike Lee's computer services at the top. We've already got that in place there. I've redone the position of some of the tables here to a very basic layout for stage 1. Again, the layout influences the difficulty of the stage, so I've kept it nice and simple on there for people to get to grips with the game. But the gameplay will be exactly the same. In terms of keeping the gameplay similar, there are sprite limitations, so there'll be less sprites on screen at once, so there'll be less characters in the background, but that works nice anyway because you've got a reduced screen size, you don't need to be too busy, and with it being a reduced screen size, we can address the gameplay flow and the time restriction by cutting the time down by 15 or 30 seconds. So hopefully if we can do that correctly, we'll have a game there where, you know, it plays just like the arcade at a slightly more rapid pace. There's also the scope to add in new characters. I've still got other characters to write in. I've got some enemies to put in, and possibly adding in, you know, a few extra stages maybe. There's a few guys I want to add in. I want to update our staff because we've got new staff now. All the people who are no longer contactable or don't want to appear will be removed from the game. And you know, we're going to play around with the enemy layout slightly. We're toying with the idea at the moment of, in order to extend the length of some of the stages, because you've got a smaller play field, having the enemies come in waves, so you're basically forced to kill, like, you know, after the enemies respawn, you're forced to kill those enemies in order to progress. That will add a little bit of length to each stage and a bit more to the challenge. There's a lot of ways we can do it, so we're toying with it at the moment. But the good news is we've got the outline there for a game that has already worked, has already been well received at events, and, you know, all the people who backed this thing originally and all the people who want to be in it still will get a chance to appear in it, not only as an arcade game now, but also as one of the first Spectrum Next games. So hopefully that will be a good experience for everybody. So I'm just going to quickly scan back through your comments here, guys, and I'll try and answer some of them. Excuse me if it looks like I'm gawping down the camera. I'm just going to scroll back a little bit and address some of your questions. I know there's been quite a few, so right. Yeah, Mike, you're totally right. The game does remind you of Mikey in some ways. Yeah, obviously with Mikey, the mechanic was slightly different in that you had to bash people off their chairs and things like that. But yeah, it does remind you of Mikey because you've got the kind of narrow paths, the grid-like layout, and rather than just being a dot collecting thing, you know, you've got different tasks to perform while you're on there. So yeah, I mean, I've always kind of peddled it as Gauntlet meets Pac-Man. But yeah, I think you're right. You know, very akin to Mikey. Yes, Mike, music. There now. I have actually got permission to use certain brilliant music already from a great chiptune musician. He gave me permission a while back. He said I was okay to use it in the game. I will double check with him, but I would like to remix that music and hopefully get it converted into AY for the Spectrum next. I think that would be nice to do. The music really sets the game, and it's got a good pace to it. It's already a chiptune inspired anyway, and I think it will really set off the game when it's added. It's supposed to be added to the arcade game anyway, so maybe we can get that task done at the same time. Fix them up. The hardware and the map catches fire. No, Jeremy, that's not what I really wanted to do. I needed something a bit more fast-paced than that, and something that was easier to control, the difficulty level. I wanted the pace to be more like an arcade game. An arcade game of the past, a typical game would last 2 minutes, yeah? Up to 5 minutes if you were good, and if you were really good, obviously then you could play for a long time on 10 pence. I wanted the fix to be like that. I wanted it so that even if you complete the game, and it takes about 20-25 minutes if you're doing like a high score run through this game. You've got the replay value. It's a high score attainer. It's that kind of game. I'm hoping towards the end we'll be able to throw in another element and add a Bomberman-like boss fight. That was always my intention for the main game, and I'd like to be able to do that for this. So that will add another bit of a slight genre challenge there at the end, but it'll add a bit more variety as well. But yeah, once we add the music, it'll add even more kind of, intense depth to it, because you'll be running around anyway. I mean, I was kind of having to go around there and rely on my reflexes and focus, but once you got the music going, it kind of gets you pumping a little bit. Yeah, the next will handle this no problem, and that was exactly why, my friends said, this would be a good candidate to be a conversion. Plus, there's no limitations when it comes to things like IPs and stuff like that. When you're searching for IPs now, everyone's asking the big developers to create sequels to big known games. You've got to pay for the rights to those things. If you've got original IPs like this with the freedom to use as you want to, it gives you a lot more freedom and control over the game. It means you haven't got to seek out licenses and things like that. And I think it's just going to be better all round. We're going back to the bedroom coder kind of things with this, and I'm very much that, believe me. Games Animal TV Lounge for the next version. Yeah, Rog, we'll address that one. Let's see where we can go with that. And yeah, Attic Attack, there you go. Roger's pointed it out. Attic Attack was very much my inspiration for doing that stage. Yeah, Kev's pointed out there what I was talking about in the video. Sorry guys, I didn't see any of these while I was talking. I was concentrating on the game and talking. But yeah, as far as the display goes, that's the decision I've made with it. We wanted to keep some of the HUD within the playfield area, but as far as reducing the maps go, we didn't want a scrolling affair because it's a bit more of a challenge, and it might be more to address glitches and things like that, and it would spoil the flow of the game. If you have to pan up and down, I think you might find yourself getting lost. Whereas when you've got a complete screen there, you can plan your route to your next pickup instantly on screen, and it's all about that fast calculation, if you know what I mean, getting to the next item and dodging the enemies that are right on top of you. So keeping it on one screen was the best way to go, and it meant that I didn't have to redraw massive amounts of the graphics. All I've had to do is take the best elements of each stage and keep those features there, and then remove the kind of copy-paste areas which are intentional, copy-paste tables and cars and things like that, because that's how old arcade games are done, and I wanted it to look just like that. I didn't want it to look as though the whole thing had been hand-drawn and then copied onto screen. I wanted it to be old arcade style, and that's how they used to do it. So, removing certain elements is very simple to do, and that's what I've done to be able to shrink the screen down, and we've gone from, square 256 by 256 to taking it down by a third, and we've still got plenty of playfield to work with. Hurrah for Horace. Indeed, Michael, indeed. I loved the Horace games back in the day. Absolutely loved them. Yes, Jeremy, the next, as of the last couple of firmwares, Mega Drive pads are officially supported. Mega Drive, as far as I understand, I think Mega Drive pads were in the same family as like the Atari 9-pin connectors, in that there's no circuitry really inside the controllers that needs controlling, if you know what I mean. Like whereas with the SNES and more buttons, you'd have like a little chip inside to distribute what went where, and then only a few pins that went to the system. The Mega Drive, I think, is a direct connection thing, one button per pin or whatever. and I think that's why it works just like the old joysticks and stuff do. But obviously you've got 3 buttons available on Mega Drive Joypad. They're readily available. There's still people producing reproductions now, so it could end up being a standard arcade controller for the next, and I'd like my game to kind of show why it's important to have that extra functionality on a pad for fast gameplay. We thought about different ways of doing it, but given the option there is going to make it suitable for everybody who's playing, and anybody who wants to play it, they can play it the way they want to play it. And being comfortable with the gameplay, I think, it's crucial to enjoying a game. And I want my game to be fun for anybody who plays. It might not be super complex, might not be super attractive, it might not break any boundaries, but I just want it to be a fun blast through, And if you can control it well in the way that you enjoy, then I think you're going to enjoy it a lot more. Our Baggies in Space does use 2 buttons if available. I wasn't aware of that, Mike, but thanks for setting me straight on that one. Okay, guys, so it's not going to be the first guy to utilise them, but at the end of the day, it'll be the first dedicated arcade port, and obviously arcade ports were built on the fact you had generally the jammer standard. You'd have, a joystick up, down, left, right, and 3 buttons as standard. So, we're kind of working to that, and I'm hoping this will influence others to attempt arcade-style conversions and go with the multiple button setup without the need to use a keyboard, or have this type of game that can be played that necessitates being slow because it's played on a keyboard. Yeah, the next probably could do it with scrolling, Jeremy, but like I've already explained the reasons why not. I just don't think it would work for the type of gameplay that I want. Keeping it to this standard template simplifies the creation slide. You've got to bear in mind here, I'm completely amateur, yeah. We're working in spare time on this, a couple of friends are giving some input on this, and, we're doing what we can with the time we've got available and with the skills that we've got. And I think this is going to be the best use of our skills and the best way to represent the arcade game. I think if you made it a scroller, it would detach itself from the gameplay style of the arcade, because you'd be forced to look at a bit like if you were to play, for example, if you were to play something like Gauntlet on a Game Gear back in the day, as opposed to playing it on a full screen, the challenge is very different because you're only focusing on a small portion of the screen at once. You're not taking in the big image, and with this, the key thing to the urgency of the game is the fact that you're having to focus on the whole screen at once, and that's what I want for this game. So the scrolling, didn't want that in this. Maybe in another game some other time, but not for this one. Textured flooring. As it happens, Jeremy, some of the stages have got textured carpets, textured scenery, but because it's an arcade-style game, I didn't want it to be that detailed, if you know what I mean. It's like the people who know, people who don't know will recognise it as an 8-bit style game. The people who do know will ask those questions, but then they'll notice the subtle things, like the colour depth, like I say, is a lot more than you would have seen on any classic game back in the day. The level of detail in the pixel art and the minute, things that are on writing and things like that is far more detailed than you would have seen on anything back in the day. I've gone to some serious detail on some of these, and if you're to add too much texture and things like that, I think it would, cause problems in the aesthetics. I need it to look arcade style. That's where I'm from, and that's where I was coming from with the game, so I'm sticking with that. There's also a few issues in that I've tried to do some textured carpets and things like that. As they've translated over to the next using the tools that we've got available, because of the more limited colour palette, where we've got like a wavy carpet or subtle kind of brush effect, it's completely lost, because the next will automatically appropriate a colour it hasn't got available to like the next nearest colour. So we've got some quite grainy, spotty effects, so I might actually have to remove those effects from the next or completely redraw them, knowing what the palette is, in order to create those effects. And it might end up with too much stippling, or I'm not really a big fan of that effect. I prefer the solid block colours. I think it makes it more arcade-like, and that's what I'm going for with this game. It's the gameplay that's the important element with this. The scrolling doesn't take much CPU per Craig Circle. Now, I agree, Kev, but like I say, it's adding a level of complexity to the game I don't really want. I want it all on screen at once. You know, that is the way the game was intended to be, and that's the kind of layout I want for it. Now, flip screen was never an option for this, Rog. I want it to be a fast-paced maze chase, you know. Yeah, the score. We're trying to implement a few things in the border because the guys I'm working with want to experiment with using the border space for something good. Obviously, we'll be doing a lot of red in this because we're theming it towards the revival colour scheme. But I'm hoping, you know, we can do something a little bit trick with the hood. You know, at least so it's a bit more obvious than we're using more than just a standard Spectrum screen space. You know, the capabilities are there, so why not use them if the game's not that demanding and we can do it. Yeah, Alan's just said that the scrolling up and down is not always good. A lot of Game Boy games did that, and something is lost in the translation. So again, somebody there seeing exactly where I'm coming from on that one. On-screen colour palette restriction, I couldn't tell you exactly. I think it's 256 colours. Next had 512 colours now, that's plenty. 256 colours. Oh, there you go, Kev says 256 colours for background, 256 colours for sprites from RGB 333, 512 colours. That's the thing, see, I've used, even though it doesn't look like I have, for some of the more advanced sprites and things like that, and you'll actually see it on the teaser demo that I did the other day of stage 1. If you look at some of the characters that have been inserted in, they're not characters that are supposed to be on that screen. But if you compare the video from that to the video I've done of this today, or any of the static shots that I've done, you'll see that some of the characters that have been inserted into that demo section there have been directly translated. And there's a character there who's got like an olive skin tone on the original port that I've done. And where it's ported over to the next, it's made him like yellow, pretty much. So things like that have got to be adjusted. Because I was using a full 32-bit colour palette of a PC to do it. So that's what I'm saying. The people in the know will notice when they see the arcade game where I've taken liberties on it not being a classic 8-bit game with limitations. And what I've actually done is I've used the full capabilities of a PC in subtle parts just to add a little bit of depth to the game and make it not feel as old and starchy, if you know what I mean. But when obviously we convert that to the next, those are the little challenges we've got to overcome, and it might mean redrawing some of the sprites, but I'll be handling all that anyway, so we'll deal with that as we come to it. Yeah, more defence there. Thank you, Mike, for the whole on-screen at once thing. Yeah, Jeremy, I'm sure that there's many effects that could be implemented into making a game of multi-layers, you know. You know, the whole thing with the next is that with time, people are going to discover more tricks. And by allowing, you know, some people, I mean, I don't know enough, but I know the kind of things I want to see and I expect from the next, and I've heard it's capable of. And if we can create games that are simple enough that a game can be an game, you know, straight away, but then you can add a few tricks to it, then at least we can put something out like this, maybe build on it for another game in the future, or others can be inspired by it, and then think, well, you know what would have worked well there if we divided up the screen in this way to allow more sprites to layer things up and create background effects and things like that. If it inspires people, that will make me happy, you know. I got my inspiration for this for another purpose. Transferring it to the next it's a big honour for me, because, you know, to see one of my games that I created entirely from my own brain, you know, on the next is going to be a big thing for me and a very proud thing for me. And, you know, I've talked a lot about people being inspired by the Bedroom Code era. I want to see Joe Average attempt these things. Okay, I'm getting some help from people who do know what they're doing, but I've got the luxury that I know, you know, I know a few people who know a few tips and tricks, and I know a few people who I can lean on for advice. other people can't. But at least if they're getting their start on the next and they've got the inspiration to see that some scrout like me can do it, then I'm hoping it will inspire others to give it a go. Wouldn't it be a great thing if, again, without the control of corporate things, without somebody calling the shots, if everybody who bought a Next released a game that they'd made and every other Next owner brought it? I think that would be fantastic. I think it would give people a lot of self-confidence. I think it'd do wonders for the system. And the library is expanding fast, and you're going to need more than just the small teams who are working on the games for the system at the moment to continue driving it forward. And now I can proudly say that I'm one of the people having a go. I hope you're liking what you see. By the way, I mean, there was a lot of blood, sweat and tears went into this initially, and now you've heard my story, I hope you can understand, anybody who has known me for a while, why things transpired the way they did. I didn't want it to work out that way, but as it happens, it looks like now it might have worked out for the better, because nobody has hated on me for that fact, and now it's getting a port to the next. It's the inspiration and the timing and the kick in the arse needed to get it finished and make it a little bit more than what it was, just a little fan thing that I did myself. Now it's becoming a bona fide game for a new system, and I'd love to, if people do like it, I mean, I'm hoping you like it. I'm going to be posting up a lot more videos of this. I'm going to be doing a production log of this. I'll probably do a few live streams where you see me editing the graphics. Some of the people I'm putting into the game. I might just set the camera up, stay quiet, and you can just watch me, drawing up the sprites for it, seeing how the levels come together, throwing a few suggestions here and there. I'm completely open to it. I've been doing it for the games I've been reviewing so far, so why not have some user input? I'm not a master at these things, but I'll certainly give it a go, and I'll do it the way I know best and the way that I've been able to do it as quick as I did initially. I quite like the style that I've created, and hopefully people will enjoy playing the game who haven't played it as to this point. Yeah, cheers, Az. What about scrolling? Shut up. Pac-Mania style cutscenes. Yeah, Jeremy, that's an interesting point. You're talking about pushing the boundaries a bit. On the cutscenes, I have actually got kind of diagonally scrolling backdrops with little pixelized images of consoles and things like that. Little effects like that wouldn't have been possible on the Spectrum back in the day. Dropping in things like that, the original intermission screens were actually placeholders. They carried the company logos of people who paid to be in the game, but that like I say, a few of those changed. The intention was to carry those company logos, but then do cheeky little scenes where my character runs on. Like I say, the level where I enter into a Spectrum, I want to be able to redo that, so when it goes to that bit, you see my character go through the door at the bottom, start walking towards the hall for the talks arena, which is the next stage after that, and then be grabbed by a bunch of enemies and dragged into a thing. We could do like a nice little cutscene on the next, which is nice and graphical, of like being sucked into this alternate dimension thing. I think that would be pretty cool. Yeah, all those, I'm sure the tricks will get better gameplay implementation, but if I could just utilise a few of them for interesting cutscenes or a bit of narrative in the game, those cool little effects, I think that would be pretty cool in itself. Everybody's a bedroom coder, Jeremy. It's like everybody's an armchair politician. Yeah, there will be some more game maker tools. Like I say, some of the guys have created their own tools. I know, obviously I've had a lot to do with Adrian Cummings on his game creation. He created his own tools for transferring music and graphics over that he'd already drawn elsewhere, because he didn't have access to the kind of insider tools that everybody else was working on. There's ways of doing things, and I think if people share those things more, there should be no animosity and no competition on the next. There shouldn't be none of that. There's no reason for there to be. Everybody should be able to release a game and have everybody else buy it. because I think the people who are buying the next are collectors anyway, and they're going to want to buy everything. And I think it's a good chance to see a lot more diversity. And everybody, if they want to, if they make 10 quid off selling their games for a quid and 10 people buy it, it'll make their day, you know. And it might inspire some people who've got the knowledge to build a bigger game using these ideas they've seen from... It's about fresh input. This is something I've tried to relate to people about the events that we do. When we do our events, I've pulled together a lot of people from different corners of the retro gaming community. Developers, you know, plebs off the street, you know, just friends, family, casual gamers, serious gamers, collectors, you know, traders. Everybody's got their input to have, and you know, to keep things fresh. If everybody sticks to their group that they know, nothing ever changes. Every so often, I will get an email out the blue from somebody saying, "I've got this random rare arcade game. Can I bring it to your show?" Yes. I want to do a talk. I'm developing this game for an unknown system, and can I show it off? Yes. I invite everybody to come and bring these funky things, because by very definition, retro has happened. It's come, it's been, it's existed, it's happened, it's gone, right? But it doesn't mean you can't have a new retro, and that's why I'm trying to do more with like the indie gamers, because they come along and they're very inspired by retro gaming. And if they can come along and be inspired to make new things and break new boundaries, it's new stuff for us old heads to see. And I think the same mentality applies, you know, with our shows as should apply to the next. If we welcome more people in and allow more people and assist them in their creativity, I think it will widen the scope entirely for game creation and you know, the direction the next is heading. The floor was dark, so the sprites pop out more. Yeah, we'll look at the palette for the actual stages, Jeremy. On the arcade game, well, it will do on the next as well. The floor palette changes every stage anyway to suit the stage. Some stages are intentionally darker. Some stages have intentionally darker backdrops and things like that. The characters stand out enough against the backdrop of those, even if the graphics are quite detailed, a little bit messy in places. But yeah, I'm glad you like what you're seeing anyway. It's definitely a fun game. Oh, the audio keep messing about again, Tony. I'm sorry about that. If I'm honest, I think I've got a bit of crap trapped in my... Because obviously I'm using an iPhone without a headphone socket. I think I've got a bit of crap trapped in my headphone socket, and it keeps going between... It feels like it's almost pushing in headphones, even though I'm not. Would be nice if we use the Spectrum mode on the next for that level. Well, it'd be cool if we did. Yeah, Gary, honestly, get a next anyway, honestly. But yeah, like I say, everybody who's backed this game, everybody who backed it originally, anybody who's getting a next now, everybody's going to get a chance to play this one, I promise you that one. I do a podcast. Can I do one at your show? Yes, mate, of course you can. Yeah, new art tools. Yeah, sorry about the audio, guys. I'll try and work out what's happening there. I think it's either to do with my phone, it could be to do with my internet signal as well, because I've got a slightly odd... it does kind of drop in and out in picture quality on my screen as well. So I think it could also be to do with my internet connection. So I'll double check that. But yeah, I'll address that anyway. Let me worry about that. I might get a microphone for this. The picture quality's fine. I might get a wireless mic for doing these, because otherwise I have to be in close proximity for you to hear me well. Yeah, thanks for that, Kev. I appreciate that. And there's not many people actually spoke up about what they think about the game anyway. I hope you all like it. I'm not looking to have my ego massage, but you know, I'd appreciate if you would give your thoughts, whatever they might be, on the game. I've never been able to, do anything like this before. I've never designed a game, and it's just my effort, and you know, it'd be nice to have it appreciated a little bit at least. Multiplayer. You know what, Jeremy? That's an interesting point. If the guys think about it, might be interesting to create some kind of Bomberman knockout kind of multiplayer. That would be pretty cool. You know, have like, go up to the screen here. If we could, I don't think it'd be too much to implement because we wouldn't actually have to redesign anything. Simply have 4 Craigs in 4 different colours, even if it's just 2, it'd be quite funky actually to have, characters start at opposite corners, no real obstacles, maybe a power-up or 2, and have a battle royale system, limited firepower. Maybe you have to collect an icon or 2 to power up your gun, but then the 2 of you just basically chase each other round, and you either win by how many tags you get on the other person, just for a bit of variety, or simply you've got so many hit points and whatever happens. The PC version wasn't coded, Jeremy. It was tool assisted. It wasn't done. Like I say, I don't know how to code. I never learned how. I originally was going to go down that path, and I never did. I learned the more practical side of computing. But yeah, I mean, you'll get to see me do the graphics and stuff on this. You might even get to see me adjust things and continue with the PC version, but I need a bit more time to concentrate on that. But yeah, just letting you know that obviously Spectrum version, next version, and arcade version, both in the works, both going to be completed sometime in the new year. So, add you with your white stick, Jeremy. Oh wow, Jeremy, we'll add you in anyway. Yeah, I will do, Tony, definitely. But anyway, guys, that was my spontaneous stream. So, the big news there, obviously, Revival Survival. New arcade-inspired ZX Spectrum next game. Please tell me what you think of it. Watch this video back. Share it around and at least get the word out there's another game in production. And I'll give you some more information on the game as it comes along. You'll see the development, and I'll also reveal a little bit more about what's behind the game in time. Okay, so but yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video anyway, and it's something new to see. It's something nobody else has seen yet on the next. That teaser I did the other day, it's not been revealed anywhere, it's not been spoken anywhere, and you've been seeing a lot of the same recently. There's something new to maybe look forward to. Anyway, we've got Revival Winter Zapped coming up in a fortnight on Saturday here in Warsaw. I've now been told for definite this is going to be a small meet. There's only going to be a few hundred people there, but we're going to have a lot of the developers there, and we're going to have, and I'm telling you now, we're going to have no less than 6 properly fully working Spectrum Next at the event. We're possibly going to have the handheld Spectrum Next prototype as well, and pretty much every game you've seen so far for the Next is going to be on display, fully playable. No queues, no one watching you over your shoulder. You're going to get a chance to speak to the developers, look at the latest build of those games. There we're going to have talks from Roger and Ollie working on the Crash and Zap annuals. We're celebrating that. There's going to be some other Commodore bods there. There's going to be like 40 consoles, 10 or 12 arcade machines, pinball machines, traders, cheap beer. It's going to be a great pre-Christmas get-together, and I hope some of you out there will come along to it because it's going to be great. And I'm going to be able to talk to you all about what the plans are for Revival 2019. So anyway, I've taken up enough of your evening. Enjoy the rest of it, and I'll catch you soon.